In this video, we're going to explore the new tube feature in MPanel version 27. To build this model, we start with a semicircle representing an inflated arch, and we convert it to a 3D polyline. You can see we've got a polyline here with 8 vertices. The next step to build the model was to copy the 3D polyline to these two positions, and then to draw a 3D polyline at the brace points between the arches. Now it's important that this bracing member, which will be an intersecting tube, does not originate or coincide with any of these vertices on the main arch. Here you can see I've selected the midway point. The other thing to ensure is that the tube, once applied to this polyline, also does not coincide with the vertices at these points. I'll make a copy of the model and walk through each stage of the procedure one step at a time. Selecting the 3 arch members, which I'm going to make larger tube diameters, we open up the options for the tool, and we're going to create mesh around the poly 150 millimeters or 6 inches. Selecting all 3, we simply run the tool and delete old. And there's our first tubes. I made the beam members a slightly smaller diameter, 4 inches. Again, select all 3 in each bay, so 6, and run the tube tool, delete old, and here's our basic model. Again, select everything. Now the next important feature is to show the seam location. So apply, again select everything, run the tool. When we zoom in we can see the white seam locations, delete old, and we can now, with this same tool, if the seam is not in the location that you'd prefer, then you can simply rotate the seam around by a number of steps. Now, when we built this mesh, we used a mesh MSurf of 25, so rotating the seam around, you simply count the number of steps or vertices in this mesh that you would want to change the direction of the seam. Now the next step is to actually intersect the tubes, and I'm going to create intersection points at the same time. As we did before, we select everything, run the tool, delete old, and we've now got, if we zoom in, we can see we've got a scalloped shape for the intersection, and at each of these vertices there is also a point which we'll use to transfer that detail onto each of these panels once they're created. Another new feature added to version 27 is a mesh modification tool, which is an adjunct to this tube tool, and that is to split meshes into segments. So I'll select the tool, and we want to split these 3 meshes into individual segments so that we can actually convert them to patterns. So select the 3, run the tool, delete old, and you'll see now we've broken the single mesh or tube into 8 individual segments. Again, I'll take a copy. Now the final step here was to separate the tubes from each other. So I'm selecting all of these elements here and moving them, and you'll see in that selection there are all of these points which represent the connection point where these beams connect to the tubes. So now with everything separate it out. We'll make a copy, and finally we'll convert these to panels. So we're going to panel a complete mesh. We want one panel for each mesh, and we've selected that we want the detail mark added, and that'll be where all of the points are on these panels. Again, I can select all of the panels in one go and convert them because I've got multiple meshes selected. Delete old, and here are all of the panels. So these are the beams, obviously, and then the individual panels here for the arches. And you can see here is the panel with the detail marks on it for the intersection with these beams. Thank you for watching. For more information, please contact support@mpanel.com.